You'd walk up to the nurse's station, and what were the nurses doing? Were they working hard? Were they going through charts and making sure everything was straight and meds were straight? Working as a team to turn everybody every 2 hours? Were they doing anything? Yeah, what were they doing? Chatting. They were on the phone. There was inevitably the person that had the holiday schedule out, analyzing it, griping, because they didn't like the day that they had to work at Christmas, even though you're a nurse and you kind of you gotta kind of know you work at Christmas every now and then. And then there was the person gossiping about the other nurse, and then there were people always complaining about the nurse manager, and then there were the people always complaining about administration. Have I complained at work? Guilty. Have I gossiped some? Guilty. Have I got wrapped up in some drama? Guilty. But the difference is that cannot be your pattern of behavior. Because who pays?
The patient.
The patient. And if you're sitting there at the nurse's station saying, well, this ain't hurting the patient for me to sit out here and gripe about this holiday schedule just one more shift, because I am PO'd that schedule came out and it's just not fair. That ain't hurting the patient for me to sit here and talk. It is. Because when we're on the clock, unless you don't have any patients in the unit, you're waiting. And sometimes in L&D or some units you might not. If you have patients in the unit, you're getting paid that hour to take care of them. Are you getting paid 15 minutes of that hour to take care of them? Mm-mm. You're getting paid for the full hour to take care of those patients. And if you're wrapped up in the drama, your patient is not getting your full attention. So that's the same as nursing school. Did I gripe about tests when I was in school? Mm-hmm. You can just see where I stood right outside that building at JC in Goshen, analyzing that test. Well, we didn't get to look at our exams. And ours got posted outside the building next to our social security number with our grade. And there was no test review. You took your exam, you went home, and you maybe went and you came back and there was your social security number and your grade, and you didn't review anything. So, yeah, you're maybe frustrated and aggravated with some of the stuff, aggravated with us some, but you put that into perspective, you follow the right paths if you need to voice a concern. And one reason why, like Elliot and Tabitha are going to be your reps, that's a good avenue to tell us what we need to do to improve. But you tell them and then you put your focus back into your studies. Okay, your patient here is your success. And if you're not putting the time in it, you're not taking care of your own success. So that's all. I mean, Dr. Hendricks is laying on. Plus, she's responsible. I mean, it's like when I'm the charge nurse or I'm the nurse manager, I'm responsible for what you do with those patients. And she's responsible for what we do and the care that y'all provide the community. And we're going to discuss it a little bit later on, but when we go to the hospital, when you're with me, you don't get to provide substandard care because you're a student. Oh, I messed it all up, but I'm a student. No, you have to give the same level of care that they're expected to get with any RN that's in that building. So when we put y'all out there, we do have to trust you're taking good care of the patient. Okay? So that's all it is. Just asking y'all to be ethical. And the other thing is, too, I have seen nursing units do things that when you sit down and counsel them, they're just like what she said. Remember where she said you give you the opportunity for a learning moment and you go speak to your peers? Is that embarrassing? Oh, God, yeah. But that happens in the hospital sometimes. Like if there's been a really bad outcome, I mean, you don't just fire the RN. Okay, we made a mistake. We left the sponge in. Well, let's just fire that circulator. Just fire the nurse. Will that solve the problem?
No.
No. Because she probably just didn't say, I don't leave the sponge in. And she didn't do that, or he didn't do that. There's probably some process that kind of led up to her doing it and forgetting. And anyway, is she the only one doing the count? No. So you need to understand that in the hospital, we just don't fire people when they do something wrong. We give people the opportunity to learn from it and do better. But that depends on what? All of us being truthful. Like she said, who's going to go tell when I made a med error?
Only you.
Only me. only me. And so when they offer, in the past we've let students, say, please don't do that because of the mistake I made. Nursing units, like whole groups of units have done some things and they're like, I can't believe we did that. But they got in there and they kind of decided, well, hey, you do this to save time and I'll do this. And then it's like, oh, like, hey, you take this Demerol that I signed out and go give it for me. I'm in a hurry. I didn't think at the moment, oh, I shouldn't be handing off a narcotic to her. She's just trying to help me. It quickly leads you down the path of, oh dear God, she's been taking Demerol off my name. Because if an RN pulls a narcotic out or a controlled substance, what do we have to make sure we see happen with that drug?
Used in one way or another.
We have to see it go in the patient. Otherwise, we are dispensing. So anyway, it comes up in a later unit. So what we're trying to tell you is learn early, don't get into bad habits, do what they're told to do. Because what happens here in school, you could quickly do again as a nurse. So, not in trouble. She's just trying to make sure that we don't do something we shouldn't do. Okay, so back to mental health. Here we go. All right, mental health settings. Okay, we're going to talk about the different settings now. And the different services. You'll probably see the best interdisciplinary teamwork ever when you go to mental health. You say you got an interdisciplinary team on med-surg, and you may see the dietitian straggle in, or, mental health, they literally sit down and have good group meetings about taking care of the clients. And the team members are the psychiatrist, they prescribe meds. Psychologist doesn't usually do that. The pharmacist may be involved. Because one of the core measures, mental health has core measures. And one of the core measures is that you don't discharge people, for example, discharge them home on more than one antipsychotic. So you're constantly trying to juggle the med. Which antidepressant works well and which antipsychotic, what can we do to minimize their symptoms without just over-sedating them? There can be a recreation therapist. That's the person that in the hospital keeps, games and activities so that they have some outlet. Psychiatric social worker, key person. You would go to the social worker if you needed help with resources at home, resources with paying for food, paying for treatment, all sorts of community work. The occupational and physical therapist, you still may need both of those. Team leaders, and the nurses. Can take place at home, like they could just be getting home health, mental health services. They could be getting mental health treatment in a nursing home or long-term care facility. Halfway houses where they're sort of independent, but they have some intervention, some oversight. Mental health services in prisons, shelters, and trying to reach out to the homeless. So it is not just in the hospital. But what's the thing that the hospital offers that none of these offer? What's the big difference in hospital care as opposed to these in the community? Observation. Like if we're managing somebody in a halfway house and they're seeing a provider and things are just not working, we have to admit you to the hospital. Usually that's because they get that constant observation and the follow through and the 24-hour around the clock watching how they do. In your book, I lost my the settings are in chapter 4. And it works you through the different settings, specialized patient-centered medical homes, community mental health centers. You can do intensive outpatient therapy, That's someone, say, just left the acute setting and they need to be seen very frequently on an outpatient basis. You can even have partial hospitalization plans. That would be someone that's like diagnosed with a mental illness and they're okay functioning on their own as long as they have a really good support person. And maybe their support person works during the day and they're just not to the point where they can be alone all day. Well, they could check into the hospital during the day, go through like group therapy, do the recreational therapy. They could meet with the psychiatrist about their medications. And then in the evenings, they would go back home to their house. It's also good for, say, someone that's had a drug addiction problem. They may be doing okay as long as their husband or their wife or whoever their support person is at home. But boy, during the day, when they're at work and they're alone by themselves, they're really struggling to not go back into the addiction. That would be another good candidate that could do partial hospitalization. Go in during the day, continue with some counseling, and then come back home. Okay, so that is just this is just kind of an overview of the different services available and what, I was sorry. I was reading something. It booted me. Y'all need a break? What do y'all say? Break. 5 after. 5 after 1.
I'm getting sleepy. I'm gonna stay in this.
If you're filling out that Singing River packet, you don't have to put block or instructor. I'll fill that in for you once we get the schedule finalized. And when you finish the Singing River pack, you can just put it up here. And you put some in there, it's okay. Put it right here on the end. Singing River's right here on the end. And yeah, that mentors list is up here if anybody else is interested in being a mentor. Singing River? Biloxi? And if you have a mirror in there, you can just put it up here too. plate on top, right next to it, yes, Merritt.
You'll get a room.
I'm gonna treat the
I got, mine bleeds these. Mine bleeds these.
Don't.
I really know where. I'm talking about. It's not too far. But this was a year. You walk the whole you know?
You're at that set. Quarter here, and
If not, I'm gonna get my thyroid through. My wife can get my. I still got.
that's what?
That's fine.
Yeah, in the box. In the box. Thank you. Singing River packets can go in the box, and Merritt Health can go right next to it.
Yeah, let me know.
Singing River need to be turned in by the end of the day. Okay.
And don't put instructor block. We'll fill that in. We'll fill that in. That's a good one. That's good.
Well, what do we need that for? I didn't need to do that.
Yes.
Who? What's it, the other lady? Oh.
She went right to
No, because it's gonna have to be more than that because everybody from Ocean Springs is coming with us. Because they don't have one at Ocean Springs, so they'll be moved over there with us. Move out the way. Look, you ain't even. I didn't want it done.
Oh, yeah, no,
You
I,
really had it done. Like bend over. You don't use that one at all, do you?
That's what we invited you to.
Yeah, remember that you don't use it at all.
no, I've got a personal one. That I use. I don't do anything. Like, even if sending documents in the instructors, I use that instead of the school one most of the time.
Okay.
One call, that's all.
Ooh, okay, so we're going to talk about the role of the nurse now, and I'm going to try to make some tracks because we've done a lot of other stuff going on. A lot of other stuff. Role of the nurse. If you a lot of what we'll be talking about will still be in chapter 1 on what the role of the mental health nurse is. And if you look at table 1.2, it goes over basic level nursing and advanced practice nursing. in mental health. It's a table. And so keep that in mind. Now, so that we understand, yeah, we're good. Yeah. You're welcome. Okay. So basically, you can read over these slides, but overview about mental health nursing is, remember the big, huge institutions, the mental health hospitals. We were on vacation last year, and we stopped in this little town in West Virginia driving through, and it was this old building there called the West Virginia Lunatic Asylum. It was huge. And it has like but huge buildings, and it was institutionalization of anyone with mental illness. You know, that was the trend. And you could get put in there. You know, if my husband just thought I was having problems and went to a doctor and got a doctor to commit me, I could just get put in the West Virginia Lunatic Asylum. I'm sure he still wishes it was that way, but it's not. Remember that part about rights? I have rights. But around in the 1960s, that started to change. The Community Mental Health Centers Act was enacted by President Kennedy in 1963. Basically, it was just try to get people out of these institutions and try to put them back in the community at what we said earlier, at their highest level of functioning, if they're able to. So funding started being pulled from that big, huge institution and put into things like we just talked about in community, halfway houses, outpatient therapy, day programs, and just moving people out. You'll see it in Mississippi now. We don't have quite as many regional mental health centers as we did. Alabama too. I don't even know if Searcy is still open. I didn't think so. Searcy was a big regional Alabama mental health center. So you see that push to put the dollars in the community. So with that, that changes the roles and the amount of roles that nurses play in mental health. You're not just going to be an inpatient nurse. You can be doing all these other programs that we just mentioned. In the other chapter, also in the 60s, what we call entitlement programs, whether that's the right term or not, started coming out. That's when Medicaid, Medicare funding came about, was in the 60s. Housing assistance, food stamps. So see, the thought was you put more of your money into these type programs, then hopefully the patients with mental illness will have more help so that they can live and function in society and not institutionalized. Okay? Think in the book we'll say that the jury is still out on what works in this country, and certainly now. The challenges, few choices for outpatient therapy, still limited funding, insurance, whether or not it will pay for therapy or not, what Medicaid, Medicare will pay for, trying to get people the Medicaid that they need, limited funding, more clients than resources. You sit on a client in inpatient therapy for weeks and months waiting on a bed, say at Whitfield. Then they go somewhere like that and they see them for a while and discharge them out and they're right back and then they're back to where they started. Resistance of seriously mentally ill patients to treatment. That's where that right to choice comes in. And do we hold people against their will? Because a lot of those people that were institutionalized did not want to be there, but we held them there against their will. And so when you go back to giving clients the right to choose, sometimes they don't want to be there. And then there is something we'll talk about later. Sometimes people who are mentally ill don't realize they're mentally ill, so they don't understand they need the treatment, or they get the feeling a little better and they want to leave. 1980s. The Commission on Mental Health was developed. They started trying to look at what was going on, especially after the mass exodus of the bigger institutions, and tried to reevaluate and improve services. Where are we at now? limited insurance for inpatient coverage, so patients are being discharged. Case management, the push is to not just treat this visit by the patient, but let's look at this patient's, all their needs. And your case manager is an integral part of the healthcare team. We have an aging population now. I don't know if anybody's been down Hospital Road in Ocean Springs to see the big memory care center they're building. I don't know about y'all, that just makes chills. I mean, it's huge. More of an incidence of dementia. Those rates are rising, plus there are more people, the baby boomers are aging. Increasing cultural diversity, so how people approach mental health is different. It's not just a homogenous society in the U.S. And increasing technology, which may be a good thing or a bad thing. So we're just going to talk about standards of practice for a nurse in this environment. Okay, so nothing changes. You still follow the nursing process. Assess, diagnose, identify your goals or your outcomes, plan how to get there, implement. Now there's some different terms in here. Let's see. Like I said, on page 13 in table 1.2, it talks about the interventions that a mental health nurse does.
Somebody's knocking.
Coordination of care. Okay, there is somebody. Oh, okay. Today's an odd day. So coordination of care. In mental health nursing, it's not just you going and taking your patient assignments. You go give your meds, do your bath, you prep them maybe for surgery, ambulate them, get their meals, plan discharge and all. You're having to coordinate their care through the day. Are they going to group therapy that we're having this morning? I need to coordinate with the therapist that's doing the group therapy this morning and make sure I get all my clients down there and they're in the day room and they're doing what they need to do. Usually mental health nurses will teach some sort of a class. They'll take turns in teaching something to the patients every day, and so the nurses will do a little group. So you have to plan what you're going to teach. You got to start planning on where they're going when they're discharged. You may be working with that other facility, making sure you have everything together, making sure you've done everything for the patient so they're ready to go to that next level, whether higher level of care or a lower community level of care is ready. Health teaching and promotion. When you're out on the floor in med-surg, you're probably teaching about post-op, coughing and deep breathing and ambulating. Here you may be teaching basic things like some stress management tools, coping mechanisms. It's just different things that you're teaching. Now, a new different word is milieu therapy. Milieu is the setting within where care takes place. Because when you're on an ambulatory mental health unit, everybody's up walking around. They're not in their rooms. When we go to Gulf Oaks, they lock their rooms. They lock their rooms so the patients can't go in there during the day. And we were actually there right after they had implemented it, and they were kind of struggling because they only had like 1 or 2 restrooms. And so they found out they needed to have somebody checking the restrooms and keeping it clean because all the patients were using the same restroom. So simple things like that and changing the flow. Because what a lot of times you would get them out in the day room, and then they'd say, well, I need to go back to my room to use the restroom. And then they wouldn't come back out. And so you spent a long time going, well, you came in the room and you need to go back to the day room. So managing that milieu. Because when they come in for inpatient therapy and they've had something go on, whatever it may be, a schizophrenic break or an overdose attempt, whatever it may be, they need to practice their normal skills on how they're going to cope with day-to-day skills outside the hospital, they need to start practicing it when they're with you in the hospital. So even though they may want to stay in their room and not come out, the role of the nurse is to have them out there, getting back in the routine, eating on a normal basis, sleeping, interacting with people, and practicing skills. So you're managing the milieu. So inpatient, people are getting admitted for all kinds of reasons. Is that milieu always going smoothly? Does everybody get along good? No. So milieu therapy is what the nurse is up to a lot of times, watching which clients are manipulating and upsetting the other ones, which one's getting left out. Is there some sort of click going on where one patient, just like what goes on in society, goes on in that milieu, and the nurse needs to oversee it and keep everybody on task that it's therapeutic for everybody. Pharmacological interventions, med therapy will be a big part of it. You got to make sure you're on top of your meds. Biologic and complementary interventions. What other type of therapy they're doing, if they're doing electroshock, if they're going for outpatient, and maybe physical therapy, who knows. You're on top of that, and then evaluation. Is it working? Because you'll be meeting with that interdisciplinary team, and they're going to want your feedback. Leslie, what are you seeing? How's Ms. Johnson doing out in the day room today? Well, your assessment is giving feedback, helping to drive the team. Now, what do you think an advanced practice nurse might do that's different than just a registered nurse in this setting? What do you think an APRN might be doing? Prescribing meds, exactly. They can do psychotherapy, so they can do therapy, and they can do consults. So nurse pracs are a big part of the mental health team. And one of the key things that they do that basic level RN does not do is prescribe meds. Here's the mental status exam. This is in your skills module. This is everything that you'll be assessing on the client. And we will do this together in the lab. You want to look at how is their speech? You know, you might have one question about that on your assessment on med-surg, but this gets into how their speech rate. Are they intelligible? The volume, the speech quality. And it's much more in depth. And attitude, appropriateness of their behavior. So you can look over that. And that is the basics of the role of the RN. I'm going to keep going so that we can get this all covered. And then tomorrow we can kind of recap, because today kind of has been a choppy day. So when we start tomorrow, we'll kind of start on what we went over today and then move into tomorrow. So let's go into personality development. So we're doing personality development. This is really a lot more about theorists. Remember when we talked about Maslow on that question? So this is more just some theorists and how they think our personality develops. Okay. Most all of this is in chapter 2. Chapter 2. And as we hit each theorist, I'll let you know where we're at. So probably everybody's heard about Freud. And your personality is just, what makes us all unique. And how did we get to have this personality that we have? So what we're talking about now are all these different theorists and how they think we developed our personality. And kind of like we said in that first question, probably not one answer alone is right. There may be a little bit of truth in them all. Freud was known for thinking that most all of any problems that we had with our personality or mental illness had something to do with problems with our childhood. And his talk therapy, your classic, what you imagine, going to a psychiatrist and laying on the couch and just talking to your psychiatrist, that was Freud's approach. Just talk about it and get it off your chest. And through talking about it, you can kind of help work through your problems. Free and honest disclosure of your thoughts. Getting into your subconscious. And that's where he talks about that you have your conscious thought, which is what we're aware of, but Freud's thought is that that's just the tip of an iceberg. What I'm conscious of, what I remember, what I'm thinking about, what I'm doing, is just the tip of the iceberg of what's going on with me mentally. Preconscious is stuff that's just below the surface that I can retrieve really quickly. I might not really be thinking about it, but if I think about why am I kind of anxious, oh yeah, I forgot. When I leave work here, I got to go get something done. That's your kind of your preconscious. And this is all Freud, okay? And then the unconscious is repressed memories and unacceptable urges that we just can't do because of societal norms, passions, and that stuff is lying really deep below the surface. And so his kind of thinking is through that talking, you can kind of bring this stuff up to the surface. And in that could be things caused from like trauma. If you ever hear him talk about, it was really big in the 80s, early 90s, you heard a lot about repressed memories. And you had a lot of cases where adults were coming out and saying they had repressed memories about being traumatized as a child, and now suddenly at 30 they were coming out and saying, you know, this happened to me as a child, I just couldn't remember it. It was repressed memories because it was so traumatic. And some of that has been found to be true, and then some of it is debatable. But this is his theory. He's also the one that talked about the id, the ego, and the superego. And this is kind of how our personality works. The id is that immature part of me that still functions like a child. I just want what I want when I want it. It's just me. Got my id working. But then you have your ego, which is reality. Your ego kind of steps in and is a mediator, telling your id what you can do and you can't do. And you develop these as we get older. Also, and he said you develop these around 4. So see, this kind of goes back to why he thinks that things that traumatized you as a child are probably at the root of your problems. Because if you didn't develop this ego and super ego in a good environment, then you probably didn't develop correctly. So that's where your issues come in. It says if the ego is overburdened with stress and stuff, you got a kid that's 2 or 3 and it's traumatized, living in a really bad environment, whatever it may be going on, then that personality starts to develop defense mechanisms. And in our skills module is a good list of the defense mechanisms. Denial is probably the biggest one. When we talk about people having a defense, well, she's just in denial. You've developed the ability to just not go there. Yeah, everything's on fire behind me, but I'm in denial. I just don't see it. Projection. I don't want to see what's going on with me, so I'm just going to tell you, you know what, you have a lot of problems. I project it off onto somebody else. That is a defense mechanism. And these are these things that Freud believes we develop to help with anxiety and stressors. We learned them at an early age because something happened when we were children, and now as adults we're still using them. Repression, displacement. I repress it. I have things going on. I just don't go there. I don't want to think about it. Displacement. I have a lot of problems, but I'd rather talk about my mother. my mom. I just place it on her. Everything is wrong with her. Well, let's talk about, Leslie, what's going on with you. I'm good. I'm good. It's all her. Displacement. Okay, so bad stuff happened. We learned all these defense mechanisms. Superego is the moral component of, and it should develop around 3 to 6 years old. So you can see right there, if you had a child in Freud's mind that had some problems, some trauma at early age, and you didn't develop that superego right with morals and ethicals, his thought was this is what leads to really bad behavior. Okay? Again, just high level stuff on this. Even though anxiety is an inevitable part of living, he believed we developed these defense mechanisms. He said they share two features. They operate on an unconscious level, and they help make life less threatening. He believed in the psychosexual stages of development: oral, anal, phallic, latency. We don't need to get real in the weeds with that, but it's in your book. And if you didn't move through those stages appropriately, if you had problems with your sexual development as an adult, he felt it probably had something to do with problems when you were a child. Maslow. He's known for the hierarchy. There. Maslow felt like people like Freud were just looking at our problems and focusing on the problems, and he felt like we needed to focus on helping people develop all the way to our fullest potential, and that's why you have the hierarchy. And now, whether everybody gets to the self-actualization or not is debatable, but I will tell you, and when we talk about theorists, just how do we use them as a nurse? You use this every day in the hospital. If you're in there trying to do something with the patient and you hadn't moved them past being hungry, it's like blah, 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 blah. And you're like, I'm trying to tell you something so important. Can't you just trust me that lunch is coming? No, I'm starving. I don't want to hear what you're saying. I don't feel good. So, Maslow, you go back to that. People, even me, if I'm just starving, I don't hear what you're saying. So, that was his main, what he is known for is the hierarchy of needs. And once you get past the basic physiological and safety, and then we feel loved, then we can get some self-esteem. But the top of the pyramid is self-actualization, that I feel like I've reached, I've actualized myself. I have arrived. And that is the task for all humans. He, on figure 2.5, talks about Maslow in your book. And now Sullivan. Sullivan believed in interpersonal relations, psychotherapy. He believed most of our problems were based on how we interact with others. So the goal of Sullivan's therapy was to try to improve your interaction with other people, and that would in turn improve your mental health. And he believed these were our problem areas: grief, role disputes, role transition, and interpersonal deficit. Again, we're not getting, this whole test is not about a huge quiz on theorists, but he believed most of our problems that we were in one of these areas. Like I'm having disputes with my significant other, or I'm trying to move from being student to nurse, or empty nest syndrome, big transitions in life, and that we have trouble changing and coping. Erickson, and he's on page 30. Erickson, you probably remember Erickson from PEDS, maternal child, those stages of development. And remember Erickson said that if you didn't successfully move through one of these transition stages as a children, then that was where you were going to kind of be stuck and have some problems with mental health. And so this is a good time to bring up development versus mental illness. If someone has a developmental issue, like I've got a toddler that won't walk, well then we just need to see what the problem is, why this child hasn't developmentally learned the skill walk. Is there something wrong? That doesn't mean there's a mental illness. Okay? And sometimes you'll have parents be concerned about, I just don't know if there's something wrong with my child, and you'll see more and more mental illness with children. But you always want to remember Erickson's stages of development. Well, how old is your child? Well, they just seem too attached. They cry. When I leave them, well, ask how old the child is. Well, it's 2 years old. Well, developmentally, that's kind of normal that child is crying and having trouble separating from you. Sometimes you'll have a client in the hospital and it looks like mental illness, some sort of a personality disorder or something, but then you just find out it's a developmental issue. You have a 30-year-old who's developmentally a 4-year-old. Okay, so you see how that's different than mental illness. This 30-year-old doesn't know how to act. They developmentally are only on the level of a 4-year-old. So just mainly remember that we should always assess where they're at developmentally and then assess mental illness. Two separate things. Mahler, again, page 30. We will talk about borderline personalities later on. You may want to remember Mahler. And his main thing that he brought to the table was believing that some sort of a separation issue happened between you when you were small and your mother. Something traumatic happened when you should make that natural separation from your mom. And it was not able to happen normally. Something traumatic happened, or your mother was mean to you, or something didn't work. And so that, to him, was at the root of mental illness, and especially borderline personalities. We will talk about borderline personalities in Unit 3, and you will find that early traumatic things do kind of lead to that personality disorder. Again, don't need to be in the weeds. Piaget, he's on page 32. Piaget is more into cognitive therapy, how you think, working on how you think to help you solve your mental illness issues. And he believed that as you move from remember when you assessed your newborns in the nursery and they had the reflexes, rooting and all that stuff, that's just very primeval, that's, our base level. He believed you move from just that reflex operation through these different stages, and you learned how to do things, and so he believed you could learn how to fix your mental problems. Cognitive therapy. We're going to teach you new ways to think. We're going to teach you new ways to react. We didn't need to get into the cause. I don't care what your mama did to you. Something happened to you cognitively, but we're going to teach you some skill sets so that you're better. Kohlberg, Peplau. Now, Peplau was an RN, so that's important to remember that Peplau kind of set the stage for what the role of the mental health RN is. She worked a lot on interpersonal therapy as well, and how we interact with each other can improve our mental health. She viewed us as an education instrument. she kind of looked at mental illness as an opportunity for nurses to get in there and teach people, educate people, and help them to learn better ways and to coping strategies. And that's true. That's what we do. You're in there teaching. So briefly, that is personality development. When you're studying that together, you just need to have the basic type of therapy that each one of those therapists is known for. And, you know, if you're in a group, hey, what about Peplau? Oh, she was an RN. She kind of established the role of mental health RN. And so, what was Maslow remembered for, and how we use that. Go ahead and do communication. Now, therapeutic communication is so going to come up all through Unit 1, 2, and 3.
I think that's some of the hardest ones to learn on those tests.
Some of it, yeah, and if you've done it some, we're going to be back into it. But it's all going to be about if you remember what not to do, you know, then what to do. Because sometimes even me, I'm like, I don't have anything. I was in my mental health
No
clinic.
filter there.
Yeah, well, or not know what to say.
Or speak your foot in your mouth.
Yeah,
Been there, done that.
my grandpa had dementia. My aunt and my mom told me I could tell the story. And they had just been working with him and sitting with Grandpa. And he would come, his dementia was so weird. Even me, I couldn't put it, anyway. He told my aunt one night, he said, those little kids are over there playing again. And it wasn't sundowners, it was broad daylight. And he said, they're over there playing in my room. And I wish they'd get out of my stuff. And they keep coming back and all this. And my aunt goes, Daddy, I don't see those kids. And he said, pretend. And she was like, what kind of weird is this? I mean, one minute he's seeing the kids, and the next he's lucid enough to know that she knows the kids are, anyway. And then when I was in, I'll tell you, when I was in a mental health clinical, and we did it on the VA on the beach at Biloxi. It was huge, and we had to walk from the big buildings across that huge campus, and we were walking with our clients, and we went several days. So I had this same client for several days, and he was schizophrenic, and he would do like word soup and just talk. And he had been talking, and I was listening, and I was trying to think of what to say. You know, you're so worried as a student. I don't want to say the wrong thing, and as a nurse. And he said something about DOTS, and he said, you got DOTS in your eyes and all that. And I was trying to be there. And I said, so would you like to tell me, you know, what DOTS are? Could you tell me what they are? And he went, dots. And I was like, okay. And he laughed at me. Just remember. I was like, well, so much for that. Okay. Most clients, like she said, nursing is the most trusted profession. And y'all, I think it's been that way since 2000. The only time it wasn't was the first responders after September 11th. We are trusted. So clients, even in a mentally ill state where they're not very healthy at the time, will still recognize that you want to help them. And so they're pretty forgiving, especially to students, you know, because you're always worried, what if I say the wrong thing? But these are some skills that will help you in those moments of knowing what to do and give you a little wheelhouse of how to therapeutically communicate. And remember, nursing is a science and an art. You know, usually it's one or the other, but it is a science. It's very scientific, but it's also an art. And it is establishing a caring relationship We're not just going in there doing tasks with these people. We're giving of ourselves and forming a caring relationship. And you know, there's social relationships, and the reason why we're talking about these relationships now is because they're real important in mental health. Okay, a little more different than everywhere else. You've got your social relationships and your intimate relationships. Socially, we may go places together and do things in all. Intimate relationship, you know, a significant other. But then you've got the therapeutic relationship. And therapeutic relationship is the focus must be on that client. These other two relationships we're sharing with each other. I focus on you, you focus on me, we give and take, we do for each other. The therapeutic relationship is focused on the problems of that client. And never in nursing is it more important than mental health. You always focus on the needs, experience, and feelings of the patient, not the nurses. As tempted as I ever am, I just never ever try to go in a room and say, I am so busy today. Because nothing makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up more than to hear my nurse say, I am so busy today. I'm like, please don't make a mistake. How busy are you? You need me to give my own meds? You're making me nervous. And so the focus shouldn't be on whether that patient likes you or not. Focus shouldn't be on what that patient thinks about you or whether they're grateful for the care you're given. If you want to go nuts as a nurse, go home every afternoon and think to yourself, they didn't even care what I did all day long. About 1 year in, you're going to be like, I need another job. I made a big mistake. If you ask yourself every day if they're grateful for the care you're given, unfortunately, many times it's no. Or, unfortunately, you may not ever know. Or they may be very grateful for the care you give and you just not ever know it. So that's not the focus. And I've heard nurses say that. They don't even care. And I said it. They don't even care. Nurse and client agree about the areas to work on, so they collaborate. This relationship, we're talking about this therapeutic relationship. We're going to collaborate on what our goals are. And we interact with each other. Going into this, as a nurse, you have to be self-aware. And sometimes you're more apt to just have a social relationship with the patient, very superficial. Hey, how you doing? I'm going to bring you meds. You know, if you need anything, come. Kick the door shut. Or ask as you're going out and holding the door, need anything? But this therapeutic relationship is going to be more than that, okay? And so you're going to have to get in the weeds with this patient. Okay, what can affect this communication? Personal factors, environmental, and relationship factors can impact this relationship you're forming with this patient. What type of personality do they have? What type do you have? What type of setting are you in? Are they a court commit that doesn't want to be in the hospital? Or is this a patient that asked to come in the hospital and really needs to be there? That can affect this relationship. Because here's the things you have to have for the relationship to be therapeutic. Trust. They have to trust you. If you tell them, I'll be back at 1 o'clock and we'll finish this up, what time do you need to be back? 1 o'clock. If you tell them, I'll meet again with you Saturday when I work, and then you come in Saturday and don't go in their room to see them, trust is gone, okay? Genuine interest. I don't have to agree with anything going on with them, but I do need to have a genuine interest in this relationship and getting them better, and they have to be able to tell it, okay? Empathy. If I tell you, God, I feel so sorry for you, that's sympathy. Empathy is, wow, I can really understand how hard this must be for you. Empathy is just letting them know that I understand how you feel. Sympathy means you have pity on them. And I don't know about y'all, sometimes I appreciate sympathy. But sometimes if I see people, I used to say I didn't know what was worse when my kids looked at me, whether they were looking at me with sympathy or disgust, because both made you feel kind of bad. They'd look at you like, oh, I feel sorry. She's so dumb. But, or just disgusted with you. So, you know, empathy is what we need to be able to give the mental health client. You need to be able to say, well, if it ever comes up, you would say something like, I understand how you feel. Not, ooh, I feel sorry for you. That's pity. Acceptance. Does acceptance mean agreement? Acceptance. I accept you for where you're at in your life and what's going on with you. Positive regard. I hold you in a positive regard. You can tell that when you meet people that you're around, if they hold you in a positive regard. It doesn't mean they like you. It doesn't have to mean they think everything you do is wonderful, but they have see you in a positive light and can offer up their self to you to a certain extent. And that's what you're going to have to do with the patient, therapeutic use of self. And that's, when you hear nurses talk about burnout, this is one of those components. And you'll know it after you've been at work for a while. And some days you just feel like, oh gosh, I can't go there, you know. But you have to give it yourself. Sit down, take time, maybe hear some things that are terribly disturbing. Maybe hear them tell things that bring up bad memories for you, and you'd rather not hear it because it reminds you of something that happens with yourself, or it's just something that's so sad or hard to hear you don't want to hear it. And then you have to bring your problem-solving abilities to the table because you have the knowledge and the skill set to help them solve some problems. Trust, we've already talked about that. But trusting behaviors, friendliness. Can't be Nurse Ratchet on the unit. And that doesn't mean nurse get abused and manipulated and taken advantage of, you know. I had a family member one time who kind of had a high regard in the community and people knew her. And she had surgery and didn't want to ambulate because it hurt. We all know that. And so being friendly doesn't mean I'm going to be like, you don't want to walk? Okay, and what about that incentive spirometer? Yay, no, okay, all right, yeah, want to deep breathe? No, okay. Friendly does not mean I lay down the nursing skills that I know you need to do. Now I know this hurts, but you're going to have to do all three of those. But friendly, you know, just caring. I have to care what happens to you. I have to be interested. Understanding, consistent. Consistent is the big one. How many times have you gone to see your family in the hospital and they say, well, the nurse said she was coming back an hour ago and I hadn't seen her? You don't want to be that nurse. Treating the client as a human being, regardless of what all is going on. They are still a human. And suggesting without telling. You just need to get up out of that bed and go down to the day room. And, you know, you're going to get up instead of, I think you'd be better. I know it'd be better if you get up and we get you down to the day room. Let me help you get dressed. And I think this would make you feel better. Suggesting instead of telling. Still not the same as not letting somebody do their deep breathing and coughing. That's a provider's order. Approachability. If I'm leaving your room and I have my hand on the doorknob and this, and I'm like, you need anything? Am I approachable? Do you need anything? That's not real approachable. Or if I'm standing here like this, not making eye contact, I'm not approachable. I hit that unit deciding I didn't want any of y'all to talk to me. It's by design. I used to have one nurse and she would be like, I know you can't talk to me between 7 and 10 in the morning, but that's just the way I am. And I was like, yeah, by design. Because between 7 and 10, we don't ask you to do anything. We're all doing it for you. See, so approachability. Listening. I have to listen. So that means I have to shut up, which for me,
Which is hard.
Listen. Listen. Quit talking and hear what they have to say. Keep your promises and be honest. Provide schedules for activity. That's one of the most important. And be congruent in words and actions. Yeah, I think you're doing great today. Yeah, you're doing great. I'm shaking my head no. That is not congruent. Oh, yeah, I think that'd be a great idea. Or, no, you're doing much better. watch your face and watch your actions. They need to be congruent. Genuine interest. Ways to not do it is to ask them a question and then not let them answer you. Don't wait for the answer. Genuine interest, if you just say, oh no, it's going to be all right. People see through that in a split second. So that is not therapeutic communication. Oh yeah, it's fine. All going to be okay. Couple of days. So don't do that. Empathy. When you're empathetic, they feel like you care enough and they can trust you enough to show some feelings. So you show some empathy. I understand how that must, I understand that must be upsetting. I can understand if I were in your shoes. Then they feel like you're interested and they can start to tell you some of their feelings. A word about sympathy. The first thing, if I said to you, oh my God, that makes me feel so bad for you. That's so sad. What's the first thing you kind of want to say back to me? Oh no, don't feel sad. What it just do is shifted the attention off of you and onto me. Isn't that funny how that works? So empathy keeps it straight on them. I can understand how you feel, but sympathy kind of shifts it back. And also pity could influence how they feel about talking to you. I know I don't really want to share any more of my problems with someone who has pity for me, because then I'm going to feel like they're going to think I'm just a disaster. Right. I don't want to. Oh, you feel that bad? Well, wait till I tell you what else happened. So just remember, when our first instinct as caring human beings is to say, "Oh, I'm so sorry." But just remember, the role of a nurse in a therapeutic relationship, check that, and we'll try to put it into another way. Turn it around to some empathy. Then they can explain better to you how it feels. And there are some good comparison. Acceptance. Acceptance is a challenge because, again, it's not saying that I agree with what you're doing. But here is a really good example of how you put acceptance into play. If I'm working with a client and they come up and they put their arm around my waist, something inappropriate like that, if I say, stop that, that's just awful, you shouldn't be doing it, I've just laid all sorts of judgment on that person, all sorts of, oh, you're way out of line, you're intentionally doing it, how dare, just tons came with that. But if I just say, don't put your hand on me like that, we're working on a professional, therapeutic relationship, and so just remove your hand and let's start all over again. Did any judgment come with that? Mm-mm. Did he get his hand off of me? Mm-hmm. Will he probably put it back? Probably not. So you don't need to pass a whole lot of judgment. You just lay down. You're not going to do that. This is not the type of relationship. Let's start all over. Instead of, you can't do that. Positive regard. Unconditional, non-judgmental attitude. It implies respect. It's like I had a family member that would always have to say, oh, you gained weight. Oh. Thanks. I hadn't noticed. Why say that? So positive regard. Exactly. Positive regard. You think that client in the mental admitted for whatever has happened to them, probably for the 16th admission for this mental illness diagnosis, needs you to come judge them? They probably judge themselves more every 5 minutes than we could ever do. So same with when you're on the floor. Another way to drive yourself crazy is you got some patient you're taking care of and they do something that you just don't agree with at all and is not healthy. And you feel like as an RN you should just make them stop doing that. There's a time and a place for it, but a lot of times your judgment really is not going to be therapeutic at all. Judgment's not. Education, support, teaching them some better habits, but straight up judgment's probably not going to change their behavior ever. It's like telling me I've gained weight. Yeah, I didn't need you to tell me that.
I knew that already.
Thanks for your judgment. Now, if they said, well, I wouldn't listen either. So, positive regard behavior. So, how do you act when you're showing your patient positive regard? You're letting them know that you're comfortable around them. You hold them in positive regard. Lean into them when you're talking. Just good body language. Do I lean into the
Eye
patient that's
contact.
balling up his fist and ready to hit me?
No.
But when I'm just in a therapeutic relationship, lean in. I'm relaxed. My arms are down by my side. I'm interested in neutral. You know, paying attention. I don't have to be all animated. Tell me more. Wow. I just am interested and I can be neutral. Avoid communicating those value judgments. They really don't need that from us. That's not what we're there for. And avoid things like, I can't believe you did that. Well, that didn't help, did it? When they, you know, I've heard people say things like that to a patient. Well, that didn't help, did it? That didn't go over well. Wrong or bad, stupid. Better things are, tell me about that. Or why don't you go on, tell me what you're thinking. So we'll get more into that, but positive regard. Therapeutic use of self. You've got to be real aware of yourself before you go into these relationships, okay? Because they will pick you apart, or you'll pick your own self apart. So be real self-aware of yourself. Self-aware of yourself. I feel real confident in my philosophical belief on life. God, marriage, whatever, you know, I have my beliefs, and I feel, and they're mine, and I'm confident in them. I'm confident about my practice, the way I treat my patients. Anyhow, you go into it confidently. You got to know, because as we talk more about these mental illnesses, a lot of them are going to do projected onto you. There'll be a lot of splitting behavior with patients between staff, luring you into problems, accusing you of things, and also you have to know yourself and be confident and be self-aware. Boundaries. I really never heard boundaries until I kind of had to take over the mental health unit, and we were talking about boundaries, and I guess I hadn't really talked a lot about it since school. Professional boundaries in mental health. If I'm taking care of you on med-surg and you're there for a week or so and we work you through some ileus and all sorts of complications and you're doing great, you go home and you live 2 streets over from me in Ocean Springs and our family kind of knows each other and you invite me over or something afterwards, I can see you out in the community. We may be friends. We live right down the road from each other. Is that appropriate? She's just my med-surg patient that had an appendectomy. It's okay. I mean, she's not giving me $100 check for the care I gave her, buying me a car. But I could meet up with her later and we could be friends. But if I've taken care of you in a mental health setting, and you're admitted for a suicide attempt and you struggling with a diagnosis of borderline or something, hey, when you get out, I've got a room you might could rent when you get out if you wanted to. Do you have anywhere to live? You can come rent from me. We can be friends. Is that appropriate?
No.
Maybe we could go out. When you get out, maybe we could go out to You can't cross those boundaries in mental health nursing. It stops. That therapeutic relationship is all you can have, okay?
And what if we show up for a clinical and a family member or something like that's there?
Let us know.
Just switch out.
Yeah, or something.
Okay. Just
Now,
curious.
you may like I said, the coast is small, and you may very well
Right.
know somebody. And then we're not just going to like snatch you out of the unit because they saw you there. You're in there. You're okay to be there as a role of an RN, but you certainly don't need to be going and doing a MSE on them and all, you know, an evaluation. But you may see somebody you know. these boundary violations can sneak up on nurses, and you'll see it sometimes, and it can be in the form of me working, and I come in and be like, are you charge nurse today? Give me Miss Johnson. I need to go ahead and take care of her. I take care of her every day. I'm the only one that knows how to take care of Miss Johnson. Give me that assignment. That's a boundary violation. I'm not the only one that can take care of Miss Johnson. And I'm crossing over the line and kind of taking some authoritative position with that patient, and that's not appropriate. I hadn't cornered the market on taking care of Miss Johnson. And we are responsible for monitoring our own behavior, because if we don't, somebody else will. But we should always maintain those boundaries. It can also look like things like I'm taking care of this patient who's working on their self. Remember, this to be a therapeutic relationship, all about them. And oh, I have had the worst time at home. You ought to know how it goes. I'm having the same trouble with my husband that you had with yours. Yeah. And I start talking about it to the patient. No. Even if they ask me. Because will some of them ask you and lure you
Yes.
in? How you doing today, Miss Lyons? You look tired. How's everything going? They'll just lure you in, and you'll be like, I am so tired. But you can't go there. Certainly can't date or have any sort of sexual relations. Does it happen? No, it never. Yes. Don't do that. And don't do it out on med search either. Till they go home. Secretive behavior.
Right.
Secretive behavior. Don't keep secrets with patients. Hey, I'll let you have ice cream twice a day just to have it. I take care of Miss Johnson and I give her ice cream when she shouldn't have it. I tell her to keep secrets. But I just put off on that patient. She's keeping secrets from me. Oh, God, it's just, don't. And then when somebody comes up and goes, Les, I need to talk to you about Miss Johnson. You're the only one taking care of her and you're giving her extra ice cream. I don't think that, what? Question about relationship? Just because I take better care of Miss Johnson than you do, you're questioning my behavior. That's great. I get offended if you question it. That's a red flag. And your super nurse behaviors. I'm the only one that can take care of Miss Johnson. All of that is boundary violations. Using nicknames and things. Hey, sweetie. How you doing? Hey, Pookie. Oh, don't do that. I call her, we call her Miss Johnson. Well, I call her Susie Q because she told me that's crossing boundaries. Touch, therapeutic touch is appropriate in limited and appropriate settings. I might put my hand on their hand. They might need a hug. You use your clinical judgment, but inappropriate touch, you don't do that. It's crossing boundaries. Unprofessional demeanor. I'm down in the break room yucking it up with a couple of patients. I'm not acting like, you can't even tell when you look down there which one's the RN and which one's the patient. Unprofessional demeanor. They get discharged and they leave me a really nice bracelet, and it costs a lot of money from the gift shop. That's not appropriate. I really appreciate your thoughtfulness, but I can't accept gifts from my patients. They leave a card for me. Hey, thanks. That's okay. A gift, over involvement, just all up in their business and the other relationships, and keeping secrets, no. You end up getting the lines blurred. You transfer feelings of what's going on with yourself onto your patient, and then sometimes you counter transfer what's going on with them onto you, and you can get so wrapped up in it that you are no longer appropriate. Break. Oh, it is time. Okay. We will leave it. Akio will be our official break time. I'm just trying to move through this first day of stuff, so thank you for your patience. Take a break till a quarter after. And Sing a River in the Box, Merit Health in the Stack. Yes, sir.
Is a lot of the, like, on the, when you work really intensely
Yes.
and all that, the coffee product thing. Now, when does it grow?
My head bobbing.
I don't know.
You didn't see me?
Yeah, issues with that, or it's not necessarily OCD, but more.
Oh, yeah. Well, we'll get more into dementia.
It's good, but more something traumatic. After somebody dies, more like that, you know,
Yeah.
dementia-like symptoms.
Yeah.
Where they're actually fine, like they're being on it. But it's short term, if I walk down the way, maybe 5 minutes, probably won't remember the conversation.
Yeah.
Or remember the people are, but
Well-
higher functioning is perfectly intact.
It's just that short term
It's
memory
just
loss
short.
is
Yeah,
frightening.
like my wife told me, what did you do? Did she just?
No idea.
Impressive.
Well, with the OCD, it's on that continuum. And is it interfering with your activities of daily living? Are you checking the coffee pot to the point where you can't function normally? And that's
No, I
just,
just forget about it.
right. And I know I'm scatterbrained and I often leave my house and forget that. That's just me being forgetful. That's not me being so anxious. Me having such a deep-seated anxiety that I must. These are the people who do the light switch 5 times.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I'm
that,
always worried that I'm not. I don't know.
yeah, that's just me being harebrained when I'm
I have the same thing. For some reason, you need to get some money to get from ELOC so that you can just pull up your phone. And that way, if you ever worry, you just look at it and be like,
right,
okay,
and
I know I
that's
got
just
it.
you having a generalization about some things that's else. You know, and that's only. But, you know, when we get into OCD and things, we're talking about people.
More like
Calls being
a bar for it.
And these checking on it doesn't for that anxiety. Now, dementia, so that checking on anxiety.
Because that's a more
That's a,
total BH psych side
yes.
versus sometimes dementia.
Dementia is more of an organic.
It's organic
Right.
neurological.
Right, and you're checking because you're
It's in Cedar Lake. So, all money.
A lot of people don't realize that, but
right, and like Singing River upstairs is gonna be all your ambulatory dementia. I'm gonna be cognitive behavioral with this anxiety. We can, break of that anxiety.
So like what you do is
New thought process.
you get one of these clinics that pay like $50 cash pay and cover everything they do while you're there.
there's actually consulate.
So like X-ray.
Oh, okay.
Consulate training.
I don't
It's
know.
what the VA adopted into for their it's a 10-week
Yeah, it only
program.
took it.
Well, that's cool. So you're ahead of game. But now, this dementia, I can do cognitive behavioral therapy on you all day long. But that ain't the goal. You just can't look at
But they give you, it does give you some cultivation of
It's in Cedar Lake.
Yeah.
it does depend on the causation of the dementia. If it's true
Yeah, because Robert stared at it when I asked him.
progressive, it's just gonna keep you better. You're just trying to smooth it out.
and really unless you get in there,
I don't need to go back and
we're gonna
evaluate.
get them on
He
the
does it,
on
it'll
the
be like
target, and that's gonna not stop it, but it's gonna decrease
Slow the
the window.
progression. And when we get to the dementia, that's the window. Slow the
But that's where
progression.
that, it actually is, my wife, she had to realize it's like, she had no better way of putting it to you, I know I'm 40, but it's traumatic when you make it where she can understand it. She's like, what years old, what's going on? And you know, I got her and friends are like, say what you can.
No, it don't hurt. But you know, and remember.